There comes a moment, often in silence, when you realize something ancient in you has been sleeping, not gone, not broken, just buried. You feel it when you're alone, just before dawn, when the world is quiet and no one needs anything from you. There, in the stillness, a question rises. What happened to the fire that once lived in me? Not the spark of excitement, not the rush of motivation, but the fire. The one that burned even when no one believed in you. The one that whispered, you were meant for more. That fire was never just ambition. It was identity. It was the part of you that knew, beyond doubt, that your existence carried meaning. But somewhere along the path, distraction crept in like fog. Doubt grew louder, and purpose began to fade into a memory. Napoleon Hill called it drifting, a state of living where the mind is no longer governed by will, but pulled aimlessly by fear, comfort, and other people's noise. In this drifting, a quiet kind of death takes place, not of the body, but of the vision. The code within you begins to atrophy. But here's what no one told you. The fire isn't gone. It's waiting, and resurrection is not reserved for the dead. It belongs to the willing, to the ones who choose discipline over distraction, purpose over popularity, truth over comfort. This is not a motivational video. This is a rite of return, a remembering, a resurrection. And if something in you just stirred, if something deep, almost forgotten, just opened its eyes again, then this message is for you. Because you weren't meant to stay broken. You were meant to rise. Now proceeding to, this will be a deep layered exploration of Hill's concept of drifting, with symbolic imagery and psychological depth. Minimum 900 to 1,000 words, 6,000 plus characters. Shall I begin? Excellent. Now we enter the shadowed valley, the place where most remain trapped without ever knowing they've fallen. This is the first stage of resurrection. Death, not of the body, but of drift, the slow hypnosis that steals lives in silence. Let us begin. The mind without will is a vessel for decay. It doesn't happen all at once. The fall into drift is not a violent collapse. It is subtle erosion. One morning, you hit snooze instead of rising. One decision, you say, I'll start tomorrow. 1 year, you settle for comfort over calling. And so begins the quiet death of a destiny. Napoleon Hill described drifting as the most dangerous state a man can live in. Not because it looks dangerous, but because it doesn't. Drift looks like routine. It wears the mask of normalcy, but it is decay in disguise. A drifter doesn't scream. A drifter doesn't resist. A drifter forgets that he once had the power to choose. Drift is when your days blur, when your mind is pulled by trends, opinions, and survival. When your vision, once sharp like a blade, is now a fog you can't quite remember. And here is the most sinister truth. Drifting feels comfortable. That's why it's fatal. You don't notice the chains because they're made of velvet. You don't see the cage because it looks like your job, your habits, your excuses, your so-called reality. But behind every act of drift is a surrender of the will, not to the divine, but to distraction, to mediocrity, to fear dressed as logic. Hill warned, the drifter cannot succeed in any undertaking. He will be doomed to mediocrity forever, unless he awakens. Not because he lacks intelligence, not because he lacks opportunity, but because he lacks definiteness, of purpose, of will, of mind. Imagine this, a great ship designed to cross oceans with no captain at the helm. Where does it go? Nowhere, or worse, wherever the wind decides. That is the modern man, with infinite tools, infinite access, infinite potential, but no inner pilot. So he scrolls, he waits, he works jobs that numb him. He makes choices that bury him deeper. And when asked what he wants, he says, I don't know anymore. That is not life. That is sleepwalking toward the grave. And still, the code waits within. You were never meant to drift. You were meant to direct. But direction requires decision. And decision requires the death of something. The old you. The version addicted to delay. The identity rooted in survival instead of vision. Here's the paradox. To rise, you must first admit where you've fallen. And that takes courage most won't summon, because to confront the drift is to confront your own betrayal. You abandoned the fire. You silenced the voice. You made peace with just enough. And yet, even here, in this dead zone, the seed of return is alive. Because the presence of drift confirms the presence of direction. The soul only suffers when it remembers there was once a map. So here is your first choice, and make no mistake, It is a choice. Do you wake up or do you continue to sleep? Most will choose sleep because drift is easier than discipline, because they don't believe in resurrection. But you're still here, still listening, which means something in you refuses to die quietly. Honor that. It is meant to bury the drifter, the ghost self, the version of you that traded power for passivity. This is the funeral for your former excuses. Let them rot. From this day forward, you are no longer allowed to claim you don't know what to do. You do know. You were just afraid of the cost of leaving the comfort of drift behind. But what has comfort ever built? What legacy has comfort ever written? What kingdom has comfort ever resurrected from ruin? None. Purpose demands pain. Resurrection demands death. And drift must be the first to go. So say it with me, not out loud, but from your soul. I will no longer drift. I reclaim my will. I direct my mind. I choose to rise. And as you say it, the ground begins to shake. Not outside, but within. Because the moment you reclaim your will, the resurrection begins. Now we enter the sacred core of transformation. This will explore discipline not as punishment, but as sacred structure, the architecture of kings. Shall I continue? We continue. Now that the fog of drift has been named and buried, we turn toward the sacred, the structure, the spine, the invisible order that calls the soul into form. Discipline, not the sterile, militarized concept sold by hustle culture, but the deeper truth. Discipline is devotion in motion. It is the architect of resurrection. Let's begin. Discipline is the ritual that rebuilds the self. There's a reason most people never rise, because resurrection isn't poetic, it's precise. It doesn't arrive through emotion. It arrives through structure. Discipline is that structure. It is the coal buried beneath your ruins. You may not feel strong. You may not feel ready. But discipline doesn't wait for feeling. It answers to decision. The mind left undisciplined becomes a cage of impulse. It obeys distraction. It bends to convenience. It feeds on delay. But the disciplined mind, it builds temples out of time. It turns pain into progress. It becomes a sanctuary, a forge. Napoleon Hill was clear. Discipline comes through self-control. This means that one must control all negative qualities. Before you can control conditions, you must first control yourself. In other words, before you command your life, you must command yourself. Discipline is the art of self-command, and it is the key that unlocks every sealed door. But here's what no one tells you. Discipline is not restriction. It is remembrance. Every act of discipline says, I remember who I am becoming. When you rise at 5 a million, when you say no to the thing that numbs you, when you sit in silence instead of seeking noise, you are not just being productive. You are honoring your design. You are stepping into alignment with the future version of you that already exists, waiting. Discipline is the bridge between the current you and the resurrected you. And like all bridges, it requires structure, patience, repetition. This is where most people fall. Because discipline is quiet. It is not exciting. There's no applause when you keep a promise to yourself. But every day you do, the old you dies a little more. The real you returns. Think of a sculptor standing before a block of stone. At first glance, it looks like nothing. But he sees the figure trapped inside. And with each strike of the chisel, he frees it. That's what discipline is. Every day you follow through, you are sculpting your higher self from the stone of resistance. And that process, yes, it hurts. But it's sacred pain, the pain of becoming. Because to rise, you must build the strength to stay risen. And that strength only comes through daily war with the weaker self. Your emotions will fight you. Your past will tempt you. Your habits will whisper, you can do it tomorrow. But there is no tomorrow for the undisciplined. Only repetition, only delay, only the endless recycling of old patterns. You must become the kind of person who keeps promises to themselves, even when no one's watching. Especially then. That is where identity changes. That is where kings are crowned in private. Not in front of crowds, but in the early morning hours when no one sees the battle but you. And here's what's wild. Discipline is not something you're born with. It's something you forge. Like a blade through fire. Your will is shaped through the furnace of repetition. You don't find discipline. You become it. Start small. One ritual, one time block. One sacred act of devotion to your future. And then repeat. Every time you follow through, you're writing a new identity. I am the kind of person who does what I say I will do. That sentence, when lived, reshapes reality. Because the disciplined man becomes untouchable, not in body, but in will. He is not seduced by dopamine. He is not governed by mood. He does not collapse under pressure. He rises through it. He is not perfect, but he is in command, and the world bends to those who are in command of themselves. This is not about rigidity. This is about ritual. Discipline is not a cage. It is a key that unlocks your next level, your financial power, your mental clarity, your spiritual alignment. The undisciplined mind will pray for a miracle. The disciplined mind becomes one. So what now? You build the code. You design your day. You install the rituals. And then you return to them again and again and again until the fire that once felt lost becomes your nature again, not by accident, by design. Because buried beneath the ashes of your drift is not weakness. It's structure waiting to be built. And when that structure rises, so do you. Next, we uncover the eternal fuel beneath the structure. This will dive into meaning, legacy, and the indestructible ember that drives resurrection. Now that the structure is being built through discipline, we must ask the question, what is it all for? Because without meaning, even discipline becomes empty. The flame that survives even when the body breaks, the business fails, the world forgets your name. That flame is purpose. And it's the reason you are still here. You can burn the man, but you can't burn the mission. There are moments in every life when it feels like everything has been lost. The relationship ends. The business collapses. The dream slips through your fingers. And all you're left with is ash. No clarity, no answer, no one to call. Just silence. And the question, what now? If you listen carefully in that moment, beneath the noise of heartbreak and confusion, you'll feel it. A warmth, faint, but alive. Still burning. That's purpose. It survives the fire because it is the fire. Napoleon Hill wrote that definiteness of purpose is the starting point of all achievement, because without it, a man has no reason to rise. He may have goals, he may have ambition, but without purpose, he is building castles on sand. Purpose is different. Purpose outlives motivation. It is immune to trend. It is not a mood. It is an oath. It says, I am here for a reason, and no amount of failure, delay, or rejection will erase that reason. Purpose is not about doing what feels good. It's about doing what must be done, even when it breaks you. And that's why it's sacred, because it cannot be faked. You either have it or you remember it. You were born with it. It lived in you when you were still a child, dreaming in quiet corners of rooms where no one understood you. You felt it when you saw injustice and something in you stirred. You felt it when you looked at greatness and whispered, I know that's in me too. But as the years passed, the noise got louder. Bills, expectation, doubt, and slowly your flame dimmed. But dim is not dead. The ember is still there. And here's what matters now. Purpose is your responsibility to reignite. No one is coming to give it back to you. No guru, no book, not even me. Because purpose cannot be taught. It must be heard. And the only place it speaks is inside. You will never find purpose in applause. You will never find it in numbers, followers, or bank balances. Those are echoes. But purpose is the original sound. And it only speaks when you're silent enough to hear it. So I ask you now, what have you always known you were meant to do, but buried because it scared you? What truth do you carry that the world tried to shame out of you? What mission keeps finding its way back into your life, even after you've tried to let it go? That's your flame, and you can try to silence it with distraction. You can bury it beneath practical decisions. You can drown it in doubt, but it will wait. It will wait for the day you stop running. Because here's the paradox. Purpose doesn't save you from pain. It gives your pain meaning. With purpose, your struggle becomes sacrifice. Your wounds become symbols. Your setbacks become sharpening stones. And that changes everything. Because once you find your purpose, you become unburnable. The world can break your bones. It can take your money. It can mock your dreams. But it cannot touch the part of you that burns for something bigger than you. That is legacy. That is resurrection. That is why you rise, not for ego, but for impact. Purpose is not about you. It's about what flows through you when you finally get out of your own way. So what now? You name it. You write it. You claim it, not as a wish, but as a vow. And then you align your discipline with every early morning, every choice to stay focused, Every quiet night spent building instead of being, that is worship. Not religious worship, soul worship. The kind that says, I will not abandon my reason for existing. And in that moment, when your rituals align with your reason, you become unstoppable. Not because life gets easier, but because you become clearer. And clarity is power. Purpose is the compass in your storm, the map when you forget who you are, the ember beneath your ashes, waiting to be fanned into flame. So fan it, breathe into it, build around it. Let it guide your resurrection. Because when the fire comes again, and it will, only your purpose will remain, and that will be enough. Now, we descend before the rise. Shall I continue? Now we step into the most sacred fire, the fire that doesn't just burn distraction, it burns you. Because before any true resurrection, a death must occur. And it's not the world that must die. It's the version of you that cannot carry the weight of who you are becoming. Let us begin. You cannot become what you are without releasing who you were. There comes a moment on the path of transformation when the rituals are not enough, when the discipline is in place, the purpose is clear, and yet something still feels heavy, stuck, out of sync. This is the moment few talk about. The moment when you realize that your old identity is interfering with your evolution, and now it must die, not rebranded, not reformed, buried. Because the self that was built to survive cannot lead you into resurrection. You see, most people want to rise, but they want to bring their comfort with them, their stories, their limitations, their excuses dressed as identity. It doesn't work. Napoleon Hill taught that a man becomes what he thinks about most. But what he didn't say directly is that most men are thinking from the mind of their past self. You can't become the phoenix while thinking like the ashes. You must detach. The version of you that's inconsistent, gone. The version of you that breaks when criticized, gone. The version of you that avoids discomfort and chooses dopamine over destiny, dead. This is not spiritual poetry. This is spiritual surgery. Because identity is not just mindset, it's memory. And if your mind is filled with memories of failure, betrayal, delay, then every action, no matter how inspired, will be filtered through a broken mirror. You won't trust your own power. You won't believe in your own future. Because a fractured identity can't carry a divine mission. So how do we kill the old self? We starve it. We stop feeding it attention. We stop telling it stories. We stop protecting its limitations by calling them just how I am. You're not that person anymore. You've outgrown them, even if part of you is still addicted to their presence. And here's the spiritual paradox. The mind fears what the soul already chose. Your soul has already moved, but your mind is clinging to the familiarity of who you were. Because to the mind, identity is survival. But to the soul, identity is evolution. The caterpillar doesn't improve itself. It surrenders to the transformation. It dissolves. It becomes unrecognizable. And only then does it fly. So I ask you now, what part of your current identity is incompatible with your future? These are not like questions. They are crucifixion questions. They demand sacrifice, but not of your joy, of your justifications. Because as long as you keep defending the version of you that's tired, that's small, that's doubting, you'll never give birth to the version that's legendary. This death of self is not a loss. It's a liberation. It's the tearing down of false walls, false names, false limits. It's the realization that who you thought you were was only a fragment. And the whole of you, the infinite, brilliant, disciplined, driven, divine force that you are, has been watching from behind the curtain, waiting for you to step aside. Now is the time. Kill the self that delays. Kill the self that seeks approval. Kill the self that chooses what's easy over what's true. You are not here to survive the world. You are here to remake it through your presence, your work, your example. And you cannot do that while dragging your own corpse behind you. So burn it. Burn the old narratives. Burn the false modesty. Burn the name you've outgrown. And in the smoke that rises, you'll see something new. A silhouette, not fully formed, but undeniable. That's you. The real you. The version that's not scared to build, not afraid to lead, not ashamed to want more. That version isn't coming. It's already here, buried beneath the identity you now lay to rest. So rest it. Let the old self die, and let the soul rise. Next, we bring design into focus. Now that the soul is rising, how do we build it into reality? Ready to continue? Let's complete the reconstruction. We've cleared the drift. We've reinstalled discipline. We've ignited purpose. And we've buried the false identity. Now we design. Because the new self must not just exist. It must be installed into time, habit, decision, and direction. This is not resurrection by inspiration. This is resurrection by blueprint. Let's build it. The future is built by the architect, not the addict. Most people never complete the transformation because they get addicted to the feeling of change. Instead of the structure of it, they want the rise to feel cinematic. They want the moment to arrive with fireworks. They wait for signs, for motivation, for miracle. But resurrection is not emotional. It is engineered. It's the decision to stop reacting to life and begin designing it. Napoleon Hill's greatest revelation was not just about thinking and growing rich. It was about definiteness of purpose followed by intentional action. Without a definite plan, emotion will rule you, and emotion is unstable. It sways with the wind, bends under pressure, and bows to fear. But design? Design is sovereign. Design holds you when the feelings fade. Design becomes the bones of your rebirth. The person who rises is not the one who feels ready. It's the one who builds regardless of how they feel. So here's the truth. If your days are not structured, your destiny is being decided by chaos. Look around. Every great structure in history, temples, pyramids, cathedrals, was built by plan, not passion. And your life is no different. So stop waiting for the mood. Stop hoping you'll feel like it. That's not how legacies are built. What must rise now is the inner architect, the one who takes the raw materials, pain, vision, discipline, desire, and arranges them into a system that carries your future. Here's what design looks like in resurrection. Your morning is sacred, not rushed. Your tasks are chosen, not reacted to. Your rituals are repeated, not reinvented daily. Your environment is engineered, not left to chance. Your inputs are intentional, not mindless consumption. Your focus is directed, not fractured. This is not about control. This is about conscious construction. Because without design, you return to drift, even if you're motivated, even if you mean well. Emotion without architecture leads to collapse. Every time, you've seen it in yourself before. A burst of energy, a new plan, a Monday morning. But by Thursday, you're back to default. Why? Because the old identity had a system. It had well-practiced habits. It had loops, neurochemical, behavioral, emotional, that kept you exactly where you were. So if you don't replace that system with something stronger, you will get pulled back into the current of your past. Design is how you break the loop. This is not the sexy part of the journey. This is the quiet part. The spreadsheets, the daily planning, the time blocking, the boundary. But this is the part that makes the future real. And here's the soul truth. The most spiritual thing you can do right now is get organized. Because your power means nothing if it's not applied. Your vision means nothing if it's not scheduled. Your calling means nothing if it stays in your journal. So what does it look like to design your resurrection? It looks like defining your core values and aligning decisions to them, structuring your week with non-negotiable build time, mapping 90-day targets with daily rituals that feed them, systematically removing the habits, apps, and inputs that fracture focus, creating internal checkpoints to assess alignment and drift. You are not just rising. You are installing a new operating system. And once installed, it runs, with or without your feelings. It carries you when you're tired. It protects you when the world tests your resolve. Because design is defense against relapse. Design is what keeps the phoenix flying. Anyone can rise once, but the architect stays risen. So ask yourself, what does your resurrected life look like in detail? What time do you wake? What work do you protect? What inputs do you allow in your mind, your home, your body? This isn't about control. It's about alignment. You're not trying to be a robot. You're becoming a weapon, and weapons require precision. Emotion will always fluctuate, but a weapon forged in design, that's unstoppable. Because now you no longer need to rise. You've built a life that keeps you there. Now we return to silence, to wisdom, to legacy. We close with the resurrection complete and the reflection that will seal the code. Let us return to the silence where it all began. But this time, you are not broken. You are not searching. You are becoming. It reflects not who you were, but who you remember yourself to be. Let's close the ritual. If you've walked with me this far, it means one thing. You were never meant for an ordinary life. You've always known it. You've just forgotten how to say it without shame. But let me speak it over you now, clearly, without hesitation. You were meant to rise, not just once, not just through motivation, but daily, deliberately, devoutly. You were meant to rise in the morning with fire in your bones, to walk with clarity, to live by design, to stand as a living symbol of what discipline, purpose, and identity rebirth actually look like, not as a performance, but as a present. This world has tried to make you small, tried to bury you in systems of drift, addiction, comfort, and fear. But the truth is this: they didn't bury you, they planted you. And now, in this season of silence, something ancient in you has begun to bloom. You don't need permission to rise. You need alignment. You don't need applause. You need conviction. And you don't need more information. You need to remember who you are and act accordingly. So let this be your new covenant. From this day forward, I do not drift. I design. I do not beg for. I build the conditions where miracles occur. I do not wear the identity of my past. I forge the future through clarity, discipline, and devotion. Your new life will not be created in one day, but it begins today. And it begins in how you carry yourself from this moment forward. When you rise tomorrow morning, rise like it's a ritual, not a routine, a resurrection. When you choose your work, choose with vision. When you build your habits, build with the weight of legacy in your hands. And when doubt creeps back in, because it will speak to it like a witness, not a servant, that version of me no longer lives here, because the old you died in this process, not from punishment, but from release. And what remains? A soul that remembers, a mind that commands, a body that follows. You are not a product of your past. You are a steward of your future. And this future, it is worthy of you, not because it is easy, not because it is guaranteed, but because it is built on truth. And truth never dies. So I leave you here in silence, not with more steps, but with a single sentence. You've carried the code all along. Now you have the key. Use it.